Are we live? We are live. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Joshua Howell with Nerfherders Assemble. Um, I wanted to do a little video tonight. It's just going to be me chatting a bit, but I have this with an agenda, so I'm going to try to keep it from getting too crazy and too long and too much of a rant. But I don't write books and I don't do this podcast for full time. I have a part time job, or I have a full time job rather. This is my part time thing. But while I'm at my full time job, I like to listen to a lot of movie critics and movie news people on YouTube, and I'm a fan of all of them. I think everyone has a great opinion and brings a lot to the table, and that's just kind of what I listen to throughout the day. Just to kind of, I'm working on a computer. I just got my headphones on and I'm listening to it. So, obviously, some big news dropped this week with the Snyder Cut being announced. Zack Snyder's Justice League being announced that it's going to come out on HBO Max. And so I knew that was going to be a big topic on a lot of these shows. And so having followed these shows, I kind of know their history. I know that a lot of them didn't believe that this existed or didn't believe a version of this existed. So I expected some type of, retort to this and whatnot. And some of them came out and said, hey, we're sorry. We really didn't think this would ever happen, and it's happening. So let's talk about it. And then they presented facts. Others said, we knew it was happening, and here's the facts, and let's chat about it. And some others straight up started attacking the fan base. And then media outlets started attacking the fan base. I mean, before the day was over on Wednesday when this was first announced, there were news articles attacking the fans. And I, at first I was just like, this is ridiculous. But then I just kept on hearing more and more and more about it. And it just got under my skin. And so I wanted to break this down for why these news outlets are calling the fans toxic, and I'll just answer the question: who's toxic? It's not the fans. It is some of these press outlets. Not all of them, but some of them. I believe they're purposely trying to go after the fans, and I don't think it's right. So anyway, so like I said, I'm gonna try to keep this tight. So I made some pointers here. So let's get into it here. So first of all, we got to talk about the last couple years and people saying that the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League does not exist. Okay, for the last 2 years, we've had people just believing that it does and calling for it. And, I think it was we all kind of got the news when it first happened, when Joss Whedon was coming on board, that Zack Snyder had a death in the family and he was gonna step away and whatnot. We knew about that, but then in like the 5 or 6 months between that point and the movie releasing, there was a lot of dirty laundry that was put out there. And then it's continued been put out there for the past 2 years, and it is not a theory. It's pretty clear that there was some disconnect between Zack Snyder's vision of what these DC movies were going to amount to, and what the WB wanted, Warner Brothers wanted, and which is fine. That happens. How it was handled was a little crazy. But basically, we had cinematographers, we had people saying that the Snyder Cut exists. And you had all these outlets on YouTube and other places, all these personalities saying that it doesn't exist. And somebody actually went through, and this isn't mine, somebody went through and made a cut of all of that. And so I just wanted to play a little bit of it. I thought it was funny.
What's so funny?
Thing exists, or will they?
It doesn't exist.
So the Zack Snyder cut doesn't exist. This is just a collection of a lot of YouTubers.
Won't release a cut of Justice League that never existed in the first place. And we're going to start with this, and hopefully this will be the last time ever that we talk about the Snyder
Hopefully you can
Cut.
hear
It is
this.
no joke. It is right on the money. It never existed.
And this is back in 2018.
This is quite the Pulitzer-winning scoop here.
Wall Street Journal. No, it's exactly what I've been telling people too. Look, the people that think that a Snyder Cut exists are just woefully ignorant to how movie productions work.
The thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are
Hundreds of
demanding the
thousands.
Snyder Cut. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
I know enough of what's going on behind the scenes to know that, guys, there's no Snyder Cut. It's impossible to put together.
There you go.
It just doesn't exist.
But why does anyone care about the Snyder Cut still? It's like, who cares? It's over.
Oh,
Everyone cares.
yeah, but no.
I'm like, wake the fuck up. It's like,
So that's just part of the video. It's a much longer compilation of this. But basically, for the past 2 years, these news organizations, again, I follow a lot of these people on YouTube, and it's not so that I can bash them. I especially John Campea and some of these others, I truly do appreciate what they have to say, and I think that they are great at doing their job, and I usually agree with a lot of them. But they've, for the last couple years, every time there was a new billboard or every time there was something else regarding Release the Snyder Cut that came up in the news, they were happy to report on it and call these people ridiculous and say that there's no way there's a Snyder Cut. And to John Campea's credit, now sometimes he just said flat out, the Snyder Cut does not exist. Other times, he went a little deeper into detail to say, well, a finished cut of the Snyder Cut does not exist. And I think that's what a lot of these YouTubers are doing now. They're starting to backtrack now. So now that the Zack Snyder Cut, it has been announced that it's going to come out in 2021 on HBO, and that they're going to spend, somewhere around 20 to 30 million to finish it up, maybe do some reshoots, do some post-production. Now a lot of these YouTubers are coming back and saying, well, we never said the Zack Snyder Cut does not exist. We said the finished cut does not exist. And that's just not true. And John Campea's, he's the exception. He did say that. Sure, there were probably some people out there that thought that a finished cut existed, but the majority of these people that were saying release the Snyder Cut did not believe that. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's never been anybody that said that it's completely finished. It was always referred to as the 214-minute assembly cut that Zack Snyder had. We had cinematographers coming out saying that 90% of the stuff that they shot was cut from Joss Whedon's version, that they only used 10%. Zack Snyder himself has come out and said that he hasn't actually seen the new version. He refuses to see the current Justice League. But from what people have told him, he said it sounds like they only maybe kept a quarter of what he shot. So you've got that plus the cinematographer who's obviously seen it. And you put those together, you know that there is an assembly cut out there. But a lot of these YouTubers were just happy for the last 2 years to say that no Snyder Cut existed. And as you can see just from that short clip of video, they had fun talking about it. I mean, it's not like they were like, guys, consoling. They laughed about it. It was a joke to them. And these people that believed in the Snyder Cut and hoped and prayed and fought for the Snyder Cut, they were happy to laugh at them. And now that it's coming out, I think some of those YouTube personalities should not be held accountable or not have to beg for forgiveness or anything, but just recognize that they were wrong. Unfortunately, that's not happening. They're starting to reverse and go back and call these fans toxic. This is a picture that Zack Snyder put out on Twitter. Is it real? Does it exist? Of course it does. This was put out months ago. In fact, it might have even been put out a year ago, but as you can see there, it says Zack Snyder's Justice League Director's Cut, running time 2:14. Now, of course, he could have printed all that off, but he has been telling people that it exists for a long time, and his fans believed him. So then you had a bunch of true believers out there, especially last November, I believe. There was a big push to go on Twitter. If you believe that the Snyder Cut exists and we want it to release, they ask that you go on Twitter and really push it. And we heard from Gal Gadot, we heard from Ben Affleck, we of course heard from Jason Momoa, we heard from Ray Porter, we heard from Ray Fisher, we heard from David Ayer, we heard from a lot of people in Zack Snyder's camp and in the DC camp. We also heard from people over in the Marvel camp. Dave Bautista, the guy that's playing Shang-Li in Legend of the Ten Rings coming out. Scott Derrickson, he was the director of Doctor Strange. Josh Trank, Zach Penn, who's a screenwriter for a lot of Marvel films. They were coming out saying, release the Snyder Cut. And then we had a bunch of other popular people coming out. DeAndre Jordan coming out. Boss Logic. A lot of people came out on Twitter or on social media saying release the Snyder Cut. So you had all these celebrity people believing that it happened. And then, of course, you had all the... then you had Jason Momoa. I'll play this. Really fighting for this, obviously. He was loud.
Nothing. Fucking release the Snyder Cut, am I right?
Exactly. Release the Snyder Cut.
Release the fucking Snyder Cut. You know what I mean? Like,
He's been
what are
doing
we
stuff
waiting
like this for a while.
Some goodies in there. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there, so hopefully, generally the shit I put out there comes true. Let's hope it does. Release the fucking Snyder Cut, baby!
So he was very vocal on that. And then, of course, you had the fans. A lot of people have called the fans or the supporters of Release the Snyder Cut just a bunch of sad guys, mostly guys. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of guys here, but let's see. I mean, I don't want to assume people's genders or anything, but it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women there amongst the group of let's see, 12, 13 people. So it's not all guys, it's fans. It's fans. And I don't think it's right to just assume that it's a bunch of sad guys that just want to release it. But you had all these people for the last 2 years believing and supporting the Snyder Cut and wanting to support Zack Snyder. They held things like this. They put up billboards and whatnot, and they raised $156,000 to support the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So not only were they trying to get a movie that they believed existed finished and made and released, they were also supporting charities. They raised $156,000 from this one event to go towards this charity. And that's awesome. That doesn't sound like a toxic person to me, That sounds like somebody who not only really believes in what they're fighting for, but also wants to do some good in the world. So, again, that doesn't sound toxic to me. So then, this week, it was officially announced. Zack Snyder had a Vero watch party of Man of Steel, and at the end of it, he showed off this poster. And you had a lot of people excited about it. You had Ben Affleck coming out saying he's glad that this is happening. Of course, you had Jason Momoa, and let's see what he had to say about it.
See that shit? See that shit? You put it out there. You believe that? Releasing the Snyder Cut? HBO Max, man, I can't believe it. It's happening, finally. Release the Snyder Cut. Jimmy!
So he's obviously excited about it, just as excited about it as the rest of us. So you had that. And, again, I don't believe that we should go back and crucify all those people that didn't believe. They just didn't believe. Granted, they had fun, a lot of them, making fun of the people that did believe, but, it's fine. People are wrong all the time. And of course, some jokes were made. This is a fun little picture from the Harley Quinn animated series. You've got the guy that has issues with The Last Jedi, as a lot of us did. And then you've got the guy wearing Release the Snyder Cut shirt. So yes, this is fun. I don't think anybody started boycotting Harley Quinn over this, little snippet in the show. It was fun. It was fun. and it's a fun joke, and it's okay to make jokes. No one's going off about that. But there's a difference between making jokes and then being a sore loser and attacking the fans because you were wrong. And a lot of people are doing that. So these are a couple examples that I just made for mine. So the first one that I saw was this article from Digital Trends. And it came out literally the same day. The same day that the Snyder Cut was announced. At least I believe it was the same day. It might have been the day after. Yeah, it might have been the day after. But it was from Paul Squire. He wrote this for Digital Trends, and it's granted it's an opinion piece. It's his opinion. But HBO releasing the Snyder Cut of Justice League shows toxic fans are winning. He did this whole article about his version of the events and how there is just a group of horrible people that make up these toxic fans. He kind of finishes it up with the fandom menace. This isn't the first time a studio has capitulated to its loudest, most toxic fans. Disney's confused Star Wars sequel trilogy was capped off with Rise of Skywalker, a movie that seemed intent on retconning everything its loudest fans had condemned. Most damningly, new character Rose was sidelined, and as some railed that the movie had ruined their childhood, a sizable chunk of critics framed her inclusion as evidence of what they deemed forced diversity. They harassed the actor Kelly Marie Tran on social media constantly, ultimately driving her off Instagram. So yes, that did happen, and that is an example of toxic fandom. And you could find those examples, and those examples were highly reported on. So where's the highly reported examples of Justice League toxic fandom? Who was being attacked? Just because they were supporting Zack Snyder and saying that they want to see Zack Snyder's cut doesn't mean they were going after other people. And this article doesn't give examples of that. It gives some of the examples of the great things that they did, like raising over $150,000 for suicide prevention. So it lists an example of toxic fandom, but for something totally different for Star Wars, and that is a valid example. But it doesn't list an example for Justice League. So how are you going to call the fans of Justice League and of the Snyder Cut toxic if you don't have an example for why they're toxic? That doesn't seem like proper reporting. You can see there was another one. Why releasing the Snyder Cut is a dog whistle for toxic fandoms. Vanity Fair is releasing the Snyder Cut of Justice League a victory for toxic fandoms. In that middle one, again, they kind of go back and they list the history, and they say that it's finally becoming a thing, and these supporters are super excited about it. But it ends with, why is this a bad thing? And it says, again, let's see who wrote this. This is Angus Truscott. So why is this a bad thing? Releasing the Snyder Cut. Look, the idea of this is Angus. Look, the idea of an artist being able to complete their vision is great and a rare thing. It's more how we got there that's the troubling part. Movie blockbusters are no strangers to toxic fandoms. Sexist fans targeted score bombing of Captain Marvel. That was another example of toxic fandom. Before the film's released, forced Rotten Tomatoes to change their way of reviewing things. Star Wars: The Last Jedi, actor Kelly Tran was the subject of coordinated racist online harassment. Exactly. That is an example. So then, okay, I'm guessing now he's going to give an example of how the Snyder Cut fans were toxic. So the next paragraph, the Snyder Cut being greenlit sends a strong and dangerous message. We're listening to you and rewarding your questionable behavior. Hopefully this doesn't mean that Disney will acknowledge the campaign to remake The Last Jedi anytime soon, but it does make one wonder what the future impact of grassroots movements on major film studios could look like. So again, he lists two valid, he lists a couple. He talks about Captain Marvel and the sexist targeting that happened around that. He talked about the online racist harassment that was coordinated against Kelly Tran for Star Wars The Last Jedi. Those are very two correct and accurate examples of toxic fans. But then when he goes to talk about the Snyder Cut, he doesn't list an example. He just says, and the same thing goes for the Snyder Cut people. Now, again, you can't call people toxic and say that they're just as bad as these other ones if you don't give an example of why they're bad. And I just don't understand why so many places are running with this story and saying, these people are terrible. Now, this last one on here is just a YouTube link to Popcorn Planet. That's Andy Signore's channel. And he posted a video called Reject the Snyder Cult, the loud, aggressive minority of Zack Snyder's Justice League fandom. And he started it out with complaining that there was a lot of people coming after him and saying, I told you so and you were wrong, and just, blowing up his inbox or his Twitter or whatever, however they were contacting him, and saying, we were right, and he just said, oh, I'm tired of it. This news just came out a couple of days ago, okay? A couple of days ago. So sure, you are a personality that attracts a lot of people. That's literally, what you do. And you usually love when people comment on your channel and reach out to you and stuff like that. So of course, the biggest story, especially if it's a win for some of these people, they're going to want to tell you about it. And for the last 2 years, we played the video earlier. The last 2 years, they've been listening to people laugh at them, saying that they're ridiculous, saying that they don't know anything about Hollywood, saying that they're outright stupid to think that a Snyder Cut exists. And that's what they had to listen to for the last 2 years. So now that everything that they hope for has been confirmed, they're not allowed to have a little moment of I told you so? I mean, I think that's a little ridiculous. Now, a week from now or 2 weeks from now, I would understand being bombarded with stuff. And of course, I'm not advocating for people to go off and say, F you, or you're terrible, or you're stupid, or, you're a sack of shit, or anything like that. I'm not advocating for that. And if he got bombarded with 99% of that, then that's terrible. I don't think that's the case, though. I think there's a lot of people saying, you see, we believed, you didn't. And now it's coming to fruition, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And going after and calling fans toxic just because they're having a moment in the couple of days since the news, I don't think that's an example of them being toxic. You've yet to show me something that these people have done, other than raise money for charity, that's toxic. So now I want to get to a couple videos. Again, like I said, I started this out saying this is how I spend my day. I'm working on a lot of Excel spreadsheets and a lot of other things for work, and I like to have something in my ear. And I go through a lot of content really quickly, and I listen to a lot of my favorite people. One of the favorite podcast shows that I like to listen to is Fat Man Beyond with Kevin and Mark here. They're the normal people on there. And this video, it just kept on getting under my skin because it just kept on getting worse. On one side, you had Kevin Smith being, very open-minded and saying, we don't know what all happened behind the scenes, but there's a lot to point to. There was some controversy here, and it's cool to see a creator finally get a chance to realize and finish up his dream, and it's great to see these people supporting him. But then you had Mark on the other side, just completely against it, not believing that Zack Snyder even wanted anything to do with it, which makes no sense, and then just going after the fans. And also acting like he knows all the facts and has been privy to everything, and that there's absolutely no drama around this other than what we heard. And I think that's a bit naive. So here's a couple of clips, and it's from their, I show you the title of the episode, and it's from their episode from yesterday. And we'll just listen to a little snippets of it. But I think it's important to listen to what Mark has to say and refute it.
It's nice to see like somebody get their movie back.
Is it gonna keep playing?
These
Here you
the
go.
Zack Snyder flicks, I've not always been like the biggest flag waver on, but I've always been a big flag waver on the fact that like, let him finish. He's telling a fucking story. Like, and when
Yeah,
we heard what
let him finish.
Justice League could have been, I was like, that sounded fucking dope, man. Like, I would love to fucking see that and stuff. So, I'm just happy for him because.
So you see, this is a lot of
had something that
Kevin
got
Smith
away.
being, saying, "Hey, it's neat. It's neat that this could happen."
Or did he? Like, that's my question. I mean.
Oh, but then Mark cuts him off and says, "Well, he wasn't robbed or anything. He walked away."
Well, he left. Or did he? Like, that's my question.
I mean, the story on the record is,
Right.
and we can only go by what is on the record, which
Right.
he has said, which
Really?
Warner Bros. has said,
Right.
is in the wake of a devastating emotional tragedy
Right.
for his family, he stepped away from the film. And then they brought in somebody to finish what he started. And it's not
Now, yes, that is what the story was told to us when this first broke. But a lot has come out since then. A lot has come out to refute that. And the cinematographer's comments about what they kept in the film, that it wasn't just a matter of somebody coming in to finish it up. It was a massive reshoot. It was a massive do-over. Just the idea that one statement is that's it. They release their statement. That's the truth. Like, there's nothing that happens behind closed doors or away from the press. It's a very naive thing to where, well, they said this and they said it once and that's the truth and that's the end all. Like, there's nothing that could have happened. And just because Zack Snyder, who did have a loss, and he was suffering at that point, just because he didn't, immediately come out and say, no, this is what's really going on, and fight publicly, like an unprofessional person against Warner Brothers, doesn't mean that there wasn't drama behind there. But Mark continues to go on.
they stole it and they monkeyed with it is a for 14 hours.
Understandably.
And like totally, like, and I get it, but I just think the narrative of they stole it and they monkeyed with it is a little disingenuous if that is the truth of what happened. If it's not the truth of what happened, which we have no way of knowing.
Well, again, they initially said, hey, we're very sorry that Zack Snyder had this loss and he's going to step away. We're going to bring in somebody to just finish it up. If you go back and look at the statements, they were very clear that we're just going to finish Zack's work. That's not what happened. As we learned in the following months and in the years after, they took, as the cinematographer said, they reshot 90% of what Zack Snyder shot. So that is messing around with Zack Snyder's vision. That is being a bit dishonest. So that was one clip that I thought, but again, that's just part of it. But then it just kept on going, and that's why I felt I needed to comment on this. So this is his next comment that got under my skin.
I think,
And this
the
is
thing
going
that-
after the
that
fandom a
I've
bit.
come to learn about fandom, being a fandom in general, is that sometimes, most times, almost every time, it's better if we don't get what we want. Because
So now he's going after the fans for being excited about something or for calling for something, being passionate about something,
the art that we get,
which
we
is,
get to be the receiver of the art.
this is ridiculous.
And even when there's something that we love and we've devoted time and energy and passion to, we need to reserve the right to be surprised by it. And giving us what we want and what we expect is never the path to being surprised by things.
Okay, sure.
Like, I could have told you 9 different ways I thought Endgame was going to end. And I think that fandom in any way getting to be behind the wheel of something
Again,
is somewhat dangerous.
hoping for something and advocating for something is not being behind the wheel.
To any degree beyond courting the support, but rather bowing to their demands in a way, feels that way lies madness. This, to me...
Okay, so basically what he just said is he doesn't believe that Warner Brothers is doing this to make money. And later on, he says that they're not going to make money because they're releasing it on HBO Max. You know, basically, he says that they're not selling it to people; they're just releasing it to people. Like, there's no way for HBO to make money off the things that's on their that's on their streaming service. That doesn't make any sense. But basically, he's saying that they did this to bow down to the fans. They did this because the fans demanded it and dictated it, and so HBO caved. I'm pretty sure HBO has spent some time, HBO and Warner Brothers has spent some time figuring out how they could make this. They're not just spending $20 million to bow down to some fans. They've clearly come up with a way to make this and make some money off of it, and they weren't going to do it until they came to that agreement. And they figured out the path to make some money. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing it because they know they can make money off of it. And you know, saying that the fans have dictated this and that we shouldn't get what we want. I mean, again, you know, when fans see a movie and they want a sequel, or when fans want you know, a director's cut of something, that's always been a thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's attacking people. That's the problem. But just being passionate about something, that doesn't make you toxic. And then he goes on to talk about.
I think the thing that
I think this next one he's talking about other examples of this.
But I would have felt way better about this if it was Zack Snyder who had been calling Warner Brothers for years.
Oh yeah, so now he's talking about, well, so this is when he kind of alludes to the idea that this wasn't Zack Snyder's idea, that he never wanted to make this. And again, how did we find out that this was happening? We found out this was happening off Zack Snyder's Vero channel. He was doing a watch party of Man of Steel, and at the end he talked about and he released the information that yes, we're going to release the Snyder Cut. He's been doing those watch parties on Vero for a long time. We showed a tweet that he put out a while ago showing the canisters of the film. He has been talking about this for the last 2 years with the fandom. I don't think he would have done that if Zack Snyder didn't want to release this. But Mark seems to think that this wasn't his idea, and that he hasn't been pushing for it.
But I would have felt way better about this if it was Zack Snyder who had been calling Warner Brothers for years saying, I want to do this.
How do you know he didn't? Like, I mean, I know Mark is and again, I like Mark. I think he's great. I think he's got some great opinions on things. He loves a lot of the things that I love. He's a big Battlestar Galactica fan and stuff like that. I love that. But I mean, am I missing something, or is he on the phones with Warner Brothers? Anytime Zack Snyder calls, does Warner Brothers say, "Hey, hold up, Zack Snyder, we got to get Mark on the phone here so he can know what we're talking about"? Because I mean, otherwise, how would he know? How would he know that conversations between Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers haven't been going on for the last 2 years? I mean, with all this, with as big as release the Snyder Cut has been, you don't think they've had some conversations? I mean, just because he wasn't being unprofessional and being a crybaby about it and saying, screw you, Warner Brothers, let me make my movie, doesn't mean he wasn't behind the scenes being a professional about it, you know? But again, Mark doesn't seem to think that's the case.
I'm Dick Donner. I want to do my Superman 2. That's true. This has happened before. This is not the first director.
Okay, so what he's referring to is the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. And again, like we talked about, this is something that's happened before. You know, we've had crazy amounts of extended editions, special editions, remasters, alternate cuts, and one of the most famous ones is the Richard Donner cut. And what Mark is saying here,
do my Superman 2. That's true. This has happened before. This is not the first director's cut in the history of the world. Like, we've seen this a zillion times. It's Francis Ford Coppola saying, I got another 100 minutes of Apocalypse Now. Let me do this. Let me give you more Lord of the Rings, because we shot fucking a year's worth of footage that I have. These movies could be 5 hours long if you don't mind the walking. Let me do all of this. And like, I don't have a problem with that, but that's a filmmaker who's desperately trying to get this done. And by hook or by crook, we'll get it done. This is hey, Zach, we're thinking about doing this. Do you want to do it? And he's like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Which, okay, sure.
So again,
Probably
he's saying that this wasn't Zach's idea, or Zach never wanted to be involved in it. It was again the studios bowing to the fans and then coming to him. And he talks about Richard Donner going to the studios and saying, "I want to make my cut," and that did not happen. In fact, Richard Donner didn't want anything to do with it. Back in 2006, Richard Donner told IGN, "They're doing it." The Richard Donner cut. I'm not doing it. I don't even want to see it until it comes out in the theater. I'm too far away from it now. A month later, he told a website called Dark Horizons, "I would never shoot like that in a million years. I mean, it was a different way, a different style, a different interpretation." And so they made it without him. This wasn't Richard Donner coming to the studios saying it. He said he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I don't know what Mark's talking about here about, well, Zack Snyder's Richard Donner going and begging to make this film. Donner never did that. And yet, Warner Brothers paid to make that cut. And that cut wasn't just sitting around. That cut, just like a lot of other directors' cuts and remasters and special editions, sometimes they need reshoots. Sometimes they need post-production. Most times they need post-production. Color correction, all that, bringing it to the current format of definition and resolution and whatnot. Studios spend that kind of money on bringing back films or alternate or different versions of films all the time. This isn't something new, okay? It's not something new, and yet we call that the Richard Donner cut, even though he didn't want to be a part of it. But it's heralded as his cut because it's mostly his footage, and people loved it, and people fought for it, and they really wanted, they campaigned for it. In 2004, Margaret Kidder told an interview of Starlog, "There's a whole other Superman 2 in a vault somewhere, with scenes of Chris and me that have never seen the light of day. It's far better than the one that was released." So you had people back in the early 2000s that wanted a Richard Donner cut, but they weren't called toxic fans. They were just Richard Donner fans that wanted the Richard Donner cut. So this idea that Zack Snyder didn't want to have his version of the film finished, and that HBO's hand was forced and everything, that's ridiculous. And I don't understand where he's getting that info. But again, he says it with such confidence. Not like he thinks this is what happened. No, this is what happened. And it's because of toxic fans. And I don't think that's right. So then, finally, this is what really got under my nerves, because it's going back to some of those articles I shared. He starts attacking the fans next.
I've gone with both hands, and I get that. I will also say that, some of the people that...
See, he even paused because he was like, should I even talk about this? Because he knows what he's about to say is wrong.
I will also say that, some of the people behind the Release the Snyder Cut movement have not been the coolest dudes, almost entirely dudes.
Again, almost entirely dudes. We looked at that picture of just a couple supporters. There were a lot of non-dudes there, so why he's making this strange thing of going after male fans, I don't understand.
To other people on the internet. Some of them have been awful to other people on the internet who might be brown or might be female or might be right? Both.
So he's saying that there's Release the Snyder Cut fans that don't like people with brown skin and don't like women. What? Why? Again, this is an example of calling the fans toxic, but not giving examples of it. Maybe he'll give an example of it. Let's see.
Awful to other people on the internet who might be brown or might be female or might be right? Both. The discourse got very, very ugly, very, very quickly, and was somewhat unrelenting. To those who would dare voice an opinion about whether or not they liked Justice League or Man of Steel or...
being in their cats, fighting about, I like that movie. People are like, you're out of your mind.
Yes, I don't like that movie. Really? You should get raped a lot. That escalated
that
quickly.
happened?
A lot.
So he's saying that there were a lot of times online that anybody that didn't like the idea of a Zack Snyder cut was told to go be raped, and especially if they were women or people of different colors, minorities, or anybody else, they were getting attacked by Zack Snyder fans. The way he's saying it is, I mean, again, I've been following this movement for a long time, and when I heard this, I was like, what are you talking about? Same way when I read those articles. What are you talking about? And I was waiting for him to give examples.
Obviously not.
So like not
Appropriate.
not
Acceptable.
cool.
No.
Nerds, if this is supposed to be about a thing that you love desperately, does not mean that you have to be shitty about it to the other side. Just you're getting what you want.
You're getting what you want.
The part of me that cringes a little bit is that part of that community doesn't really, they shouldn't get what they want. Not if you're going to be this shitty about it.
So, now, granted, he says part of that community, but that's the only people he talks about. Now, he doesn't mention the good part of the community, the part of the community that raised funds for charities. He mentions a community that apparently attacked people that liked Justice League, told them to be raped, attacked minorities, and attacked women. I've never heard of this. I did a Google search of racist Snyder fans or sexist Snyder fans. Couldn't find anything. I had a deep dive to find what this guy was talking about. Finally, I did find something. And did I find a large community of Release the Snyder Cut fans that were doing this? No. I found one guy.
Grabbed onto it both.
Roberto Matta. Now, apparently, he was the guy that, I don't know if he created it or he was part of the creation team that initially released the petition to release the Snyder Cut. So he was among, one of those people. Again, one guy. He released that petition, and then apparently down the road, he ended up being a pretty ugly person. This is a quote, a statement from some of the fan groups, from some of the Release the Snyder Cut fan groups, and it says, aside from extreme unprofessionalism shown to his collaborators, like Fiona Zhang, myself, and more, going as far as to fabricate lies about fans trying to steal attention or his idea, his true acts were worse. After blocking and cutting off all the fans that made his petition successful. So he blocked and cut off all the people that fought for this. So it wasn't all the people that signed the petition was supporting his claims. It was, he blocked everybody. Roberto took his petition to a very racist level. Disgustingly racist, Islamophobic, sexist remarks were made, all enveloped with lies throughout. And he basically, it was one guy, realized he had a platform, started spreading some terrible things. And he started calling, Islamic people, terrorists and women. And he had issues with everybody. One guy. Now, if one fan of a sports team says something racist online, do you say that all fans of that sports team are racist? No. If one fan of anything, if one fan of the TV show Friends went on, there's a reason why there's no black people, blah 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 blah, and said something racist, you wouldn't say that all Friends fans are racist. You would say that one person is racist. So this one guy makes these tweets, and everybody disavows it. Everybody, the community. There was articles about the community coming out to say we disavow this guy, and he cut them off first and banned them and blocked them. So he clearly was doing this on his own, and yet Mark here is taking his actions. I'm guessing this is who he's talking about, and saying that this was a large part of the community. That the community was doing this, and not one guy, and yet somehow the whole community. And again, we had those articles that we talked about earlier about how these are toxic fans who attack and insult people, but there's literally no examples. This is the only thing I could find, and it was one guy. He didn't have a movement. He didn't have a team. He didn't have a group of supporters. It was one guy that everybody disavowed, but the media wants to put that one guy's statements on the whole release of Zack Snyder community. And that's, again, wrong. These people did not say that. These people are diverse. They are different, and they are alike. And they are alike in that they wanted to release the Snyder Cut. This wasn't some hateful campaign. They weren't going out saying people should be raped. They weren't attacking people of different colors. They weren't attacking people of different genders. They just wanted to release the Snyder Cut. And because one person on the internet said something, people like Mark are saying that the whole, not the whole, but a good chunk of them are saying something and that they're toxic. And again, I don't believe that that's right. So, I just think this needed to be said. I think they've been on the attack for far too long. I think it's just this wave they couldn't even give fans a couple days to rejoice. It was immediately that these news articles and these responses came out saying that these are toxic fans and they're getting what they want and good for them and they're forcing the studio and they're horrible people. It's not right. And I don't agree with the tactics of some of these YouTubers and some of these media outlets. I just think it's wrong. And I think that these people that are saying that the loudest among us were toxic and the loudest people fighting for the cut are toxic, they're saying that this dude, Jason Momoa, who was definitely among the loudest of the supporters of the people fighting to release the Snyder Cut, they're saying that he was toxic. They're saying that Ben Affleck was toxic. They're saying that Gal Gadot was toxic. And they're saying that all of their fans were toxic just because they wanted to see the Snyder Cut. And instead of just saying, hey, you were right, it does exist, we'll see if it's any good, these news outlets immediately went on the offensive and started attacking the fans. And I don't think that's right. So I think shame on them. And again, you shouldn't generalize, and you shouldn't talk so broadly about people just because they were excited about something. There are examples of toxic fandom, like the people that went after the actor Kelly Tran from The Last Jedi, and the people that went after Captain Marvel and stuff like that. That is accurate examples. Toxic fandom is not a myth. It does exist. But if you're going to call the fans of the Snyder Cut toxic, you should give an example. You should give multiple examples. You should give evidence to back up your claims and not just call them toxic because they were excited about something and because their dreams are coming true. So I'm excited for the Snyder Cut. I certainly have never gone out to attack people just because I disagreed with them. But I certainly didn't say, oh, you like Justice League, you should be raped. I never said that. And I don't believe the people in this picture ever said that. I don't believe Jason Momoa ever said that. And I think it's wrong to generalize that a good chunk of the Snyder fans were that abusive or anything like that. So Snyder Cut exists. It's coming. It's exciting. Can't wait to talk about it next year. So thanks for joining me. And don't believe this stuff. Support each other. Be kind to each other. Come together. And let's all get ready to watch this Snyder Cut. So, all right. Thanks. Have a good evening.